The Hall of Concord had been built to impress giants. Its vaulted ceiling disappeared into shimmering clouds of artificial atmosphere, tall enough to accommodate creatures that flew on wings broader than transport ships. Pillars carved from black crystal stretched hundreds of meters into the air, each engraved with the history of civilizations that had survived war, extinction, and the brutal climb to the stars. Suspended rivers of light drifted between them, displaying the banners of every member of the Galactic Coalition. It was a place where empires announced themselves, where legends were made, and today, every eye turned toward the newest delegation, the humans. A pair of massive bronze doors slid apart with a deep mechanical rumble. One by one, diplomats entered beneath the gaze of thousands of spectators seated in towering galleries. First came the Vorthak, towering reptilian warriors wrapped in ceremonial armor, each standing nearly 4 meters tall. Behind them marched the crystalline Elis, their translucent bodies refracting rainbow light across the chamber. Then the insectoid Hrax collective entered as a synchronized procession, hundreds of compound eyes observing every movement with unsettling precision. Each delegation commanded attention. Each arrival inspired whispers of admiration or caution. Then came the final announcement. Representative of the United Earth Directorate. Silence lingered for a heartbeat. A single figure stepped through the doorway. He wasn't armored. He wasn't surrounded by guards. He wasn't even particularly tall by human standards. Dark blue diplomatic attire replaced battle armor. A silver emblem rested over his chest, the symbol of Earth. His posture was calm, his expression composed, and his hands remained folded behind his back, as though he had walked into an ordinary conference rather than the greatest political gathering in known space. Commander Elias Carter looked almost ordinary. Compared to everyone else, he looked tiny. The nearest Vorthak guard could have lifted him with one hand. A merchant from the Rule Dominion leaned toward another delegate. "That's the human?" His companion clicked his mandibles in amusement. "I thought they sent a child." Soft laughter rippled across nearby balconies. An avian diplomat tilted her feathered head. "Perhaps humans never evolved predators." Another chuckled. "That would explain the size." More laughter followed. Elias heard every word. Years of diplomatic training had taught him one important lesson: never react. Instead, he continued walking across the polished obsidian floor, each measured step echoing beneath the enormous dome. His face betrayed nothing. Inside, however, he cataloged every expression: mockery, dismissal, curiosity, pity. He had seen them all before. The Coalition knew almost nothing about humanity. Earth had only recently joined interstellar society. Human ships were smaller than most military cruisers. Their colonies were few. Their technology, while innovative, lagged behind civilizations that had explored the stars for tens of thousands of years. To most species, humans were simply newcomers trying to find their place. Small, fragile, forgettable, a massive noble from the Dravic clans crossed both arms. "I expected predators." "So did I. They looked domesticated." Someone laughed loudly enough for Elias to hear. "I've seen livestock with more intimidating teeth." The crowd erupted again. Only one section of the chamber remained perfectly silent: the Karzul delegation. Unlike the polished diplomats surrounding them, the Karzul seemed carved from nightmares. Their black armor bore deep claw marks earned in countless battles. Their amber eyes never wandered. Each warrior stood over 5 meters tall, muscles shifting beneath dark scales scarred by age and combat. Across the galaxy, children were warned about the Karzul. Entire pirate fleets surrendered rather than fight them. Their homeworld was classified as one of the deadliest planets ever surveyed, a place where evolution rewarded only the strongest hunters. Their leader stood at the center: High Warlord Kareth. Stories claimed he had survived battles against creatures capable of swallowing starships. Others insisted he had personally ended wars before most civilizations had discovered electricity. Whether the stories were true hardly mattered. No one challenged him. No one even spoke above a respectful whisper in his presence. Yet while everyone else laughed, Kareth did not. His enormous golden eyes remained fixed on the approaching human. Unblinking, motionless, one of his generals leaned closer. "Supreme Warlord?" No response. Kareth's breathing had changed. Slow, measured, almost uncertain. The general frowned. He had served beside Kareth for over 2 centuries. He had watched his commander face planetary beasts without hesitation. He had seen him negotiate with tyrants while orbital bombardments reigned overhead. Never had he seen fear. Yet something in the human's face had stolen every trace of confidence from the ancient predator. Elias reached the center platform and offered the traditional Coalition salute: Commander Elias Carter, representing the people of Earth. The formal announcement echoed through the chamber. Applause scattered politely across the audience. Some clapped. Many did not. The mocking smiles remained. Then, Kareth took one slow step forward. The sound of his armored foot striking the crystal floor echoed like distant thunder. Every conversation stopped. Another step. Coalition security instinctively reached for their weapons. Even the Vorthak honor guards shifted uneasily. Why was the galaxy's most feared predator approaching the smallest delegate? Elias met the towering warrior's gaze without flinching. His heartbeat quickened, but years of military discipline kept his posture steady. The distance between them shrank. 10 meters. 5, 3. Kareth stopped. For several long seconds, the giant simply stared at the human's face, as though searching for something buried beneath time itself. His pupils narrowed. His breathing caught. The scars across his ancient features seemed to tighten. The impossible certainty in his eyes cracked into disbelief. The mighty predator, whose name inspired terror across hundreds of worlds, looked utterly shaken. His lips parted. Barely louder than a breath, he whispered two words. Impossible. The word hung in the air like a crack in reality. Impossible. No one moved. The Hall of Concord, which only moments before had echoed with laughter and smug whispers, became so quiet that the faint hum of the chamber's atmospheric shields could be heard. Commander Elias Carter stood motionless. He had expected many things from his first coalition summit: political maneuvering, diplomatic tests, thinly veiled insults. He had even prepared himself for intimidation, but he had never expected the most feared being in known space to stare at him as though he had seen a ghost. High Warlord Kareth did not blink. His ancient amber eyes searched Elias's face with unsettling intensity, lingering over every feature. The shape of his jaw, the color of his eyes, the scar near his left temple. It wasn't the look of a predator studying prey. It was the look of someone searching through memories older than reason. Elias resisted the urge to step backward. Instead, he met the giant's gaze. "Is something wrong?" he asked evenly. No answer. Behind Kareth, several armored Karzul warriors shifted uneasily. Their commander never hesitated, never doubted, never lost composure. Yet now his massive claws trembled almost imperceptibly. One of the coalition marshals finally broke the silence. "High Warlord," the armored official called cautiously. "Do you require assistance?" Kareth ignored him. His breathing grew slower, deeper, almost ceremonial. Then he took another step toward the human. Instantly, the chamber erupted into motion. Weapons slid free from ceremonial holsters. Energy lances hummed to life. Vorthak guards raised massive shields. The crystalline Elis generated shimmering defensive barriers. Even the insectoid Hrax spread into a protective formation around the diplomatic platform. The coalition had rehearsed countless disaster scenarios. None involved stopping Kareth, because no one truly believed he could be stopped. Elias noticed the tightening ring of security. He also noticed something else. The Karzul warriors had not drawn their own weapons. They looked confused, almost anxious. One leaned toward another. "What is he doing?" "I don't know. I've never seen the Supreme Warlord approach anyone without issuing a challenge." Their whispers carried genuine uncertainty. For the first time, Elias realized that whatever was happening surprised the predators as much as everyone else. Kareth stopped only a single pace away. The size difference was overwhelming. Standing before him felt like standing beneath an ancient tree whose roots reached into another age. The predator lowered his enormous head. His nostrils flared once, as if confirming a scent carried across impossible distances. His pupils widened. "No." The word escaped him almost involuntarily. "It cannot be." Elias frowned. "I'm afraid we've never met." Kareth's gaze softened. Not with weakness, with recognition. It was an expression so foreign on the face of the legendary warlord that several Karzul officers stared in open disbelief. The oldest among them quietly whispered, "I've only seen that expression once." Another officer turned. When he spoke of the first hunt. Before anyone could ask what that meant, Kareth did something no living soul expected. The giant predator removed the ceremonial blade from his waist. Gasps echoed throughout the chamber. Several coalition guards aimed their weapons. "Stand down!" one commander shouted. "Protect the human!" Energy rifles locked onto Kareth's chest. Hundreds of targeting systems filled the air with warning lights. Elias remained perfectly still. He could feel dozens of weapons aimed past his shoulders. One wrong movement, one misunderstanding, the Hall of Concord would become a battlefield. Kareth slowly turned the blade in his hands. Then, with deliberate care, he laid it gently upon the polished floor. Every Karzul warrior stiffened. Their commander's weapon had never touched the ground. Not once. Not in battle. Not in ceremony. not in surrender. It was unthinkable. Then came something even more impossible. The towering predator lowered one knee. The impact echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. Cracks spread across the crystal beneath his weight. A second knee followed. The supreme warlord of the Karzul knelt. Thousands vanished, replaced by stunned silence. The proud Vorthak stared with mouths hanging open. The Elis dimmed until their crystalline bodies barely glowed. The Rax Collective broke synchronization for the first time in recorded history. Even Kareth's own warriors looked horrified. One actually took an involuntary step forward. Supreme Warlord. Another grabbed his arm. No, but he's kneeling. I know. No Karzul has knelt since the Age of Blood. Across the hall, whispers erupted. What is happening? Has the human threatened him? Is this some kind of ritual? Is it diplomacy? No, it's impossible. Elias felt every eye in the chamber settle on him. He wanted answers as desperately as everyone else. His voice remained respectful. Warlord, why are you doing this? Kareth slowly lifted his head. His fierce amber eyes no longer carried fear. They carried reverence. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Yet every translator in the chamber rendered the words with perfect clarity. Little brother. The words rippled through the hall. Silence followed. Not confused silence. Absolute silence. Several translation systems flashed warnings. Unknown cultural reference delegates looked at one another. Little brother? What did that mean? Why would the galaxy's greatest hunter use a title of affection? Why toward the smallest species ever admitted into the coalition? Elias himself blinked. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. Kareth slowly shook his head. No, his voice was calm. Certain. I have waited my entire life to see your people. The statement struck the chamber harder than any weapon. A coalition historian stood abruptly. That is impossible. Another delegate added, humans only entered known space a few generations ago. The Vorthak ambassador folded his massive arms. You claim to have expected them? Kareth rose only enough to face the assembly while remaining on one knee before Elias. His expression became solemn, almost sacred. The ancient predator looked across every delegation gathered beneath the banners of the coalition. Then he answered the question no one had dared ask. Because, he paused, his eyes returned to the human. Our oldest stories warned us this day would come. The silence that followed Kareth's declaration seemed to stretch forever. Our oldest stories warned us this day would come. No one spoke. The words settled over the Hall of Concord like an invisible weight, pressing against every delegate present. The coalition had survived wars that reshaped star systems and political disputes that lasted centuries. But this was something entirely different. This challenged history itself. Commander Elias Carter looked around the chamber. Only minutes ago, those same faces had been smiling at humanity's expense. Now they stared at him with an entirely different expression. Not respect, not yet, confusion, and perhaps, just beneath it, unease. A crystalline delegate finally broke the silence. This is absurd. Her voice rang sharply across the hall. The Karzul possess many traditions, but myths are not evidence. Several ambassadors immediately nodded. The records of the coalition contain no mention of humans before their first warp transmissions. The archaeological databases are complete. No civilization matching humanity's description has ever existed. The Vorthak ambassador crossed his massive arms. High Warlord, are you claiming that your people encountered humans before recorded history? Kareth slowly rose to his full height. Even standing still, he commanded the room. His gaze drifted across the gathered representatives before returning to Elias. I am claiming nothing. His deep voice carried effortlessly through the chamber. I am remembering. Those 4 words silenced another wave of objections. One of the coalition historians stepped forward carrying a floating archive sphere. Memory is unreliable. Kareth nodded. For individuals. His eyes darkened, but not for an entire civilization. A murmur swept through the audience. The elderly historian frowned. What do you mean? The great predator looked upward toward the banner suspended high above the chamber. Our people remember differently. He rested one enormous claw against the ceremonial scars carved into his chest. Every generation passes the first memory unchanged. It is not a story. It is inheritance. Elias listened carefully. Earth had countless oral traditions. Legends passed from generation to generation often changed with time. But Kareth spoke with absolute certainty, not faith, knowledge. The historian remained skeptical. If such a memory exists, tell us. Kareth closed his eyes. For several moments, the enormous warrior seemed somewhere far away. When he finally spoke again, his voice had changed. It carried the rhythm of something ancient, almost sacred. Before we built cities, before we forged metal, before our people ruled the mountains, we were prey. The admission sent whispers through the chamber. No one had ever heard a Karzul admit weakness. Kareth continued. Our ancestors lived beneath broken cliffs. They hunted with stone. They buried more children than adults. They feared every sunrise. His warriors remained perfectly still, none interrupted. Clearly they had heard these words since childhood. Then his expression softened. One season. The sky fire came. A dozen historians activated recording drones. Kareth noticed but continued. The heavens split open. A burning mountain descended from the stars. Our ancestors believed the world itself had come to consume them. He opened his eyes. But instead, strangers emerged. The chamber leaned forward. They were unlike anything our people had ever seen. He looked directly at Elias. They were small. The hall remained silent. They had no scales. No one moved. They possessed no claws. The Vorthak exchanged uncertain glances. They had soft skin. The Elis dimmed slightly. They looked fragile. Elias unconsciously looked down at his own hands. They should have died. Kareth's voice lowered. They did not. Instead, they survived everything. A ripple of curiosity spread through the audience. The Predator Elder began pacing slowly across the chamber as though watching memories unfold before him. Our ancestors watched them cross frozen rivers that swallowed stronger beasts. They climbed cliffs where hunters fell. They entered forests where every creature hunted them. And they always returned. One delegate quietly whispered, "Impossible." Kareth heard him. That was exactly what our ancestors believed. He stopped before Elias once more. They laughed when the strangers first appeared. A faint smile touched his weathered face. They called them tiny. Several delegates looked away uncomfortably. They believed the newcomers would become food before the next moon. Kareth's smile disappeared. They were wrong. The room grew still again. The Predator Elder continued. When disease came, the strangers stayed. When the great beasts hunted our children, the strangers fought. When famine arrived, they shared. His voice grew quieter. They bled. They buried their own. They never abandoned us. Elias felt an unexpected tightening in his chest. The story sounded impossible. Yet Kareth wasn't telling it like a myth. He was remembering family. The historian cleared his throat. Convenient. Several delegates nodded. You describe heroes. Every civilization invents heroes. Another ambassador spoke. If these beings truly existed, where is the evidence? A murmur of agreement swept through the chamber. Kareth slowly turned toward one of his officers. Bring it! The officer hesitated only briefly before activating a holographic projector attached to his armor. Blue light expanded across the center of the hall. An enormous mountain appeared. Then caves. Ancient, weathered, untouched by modern civilization. Gasps spread through the audience. The cave walls were covered with primitive paintings. Predators, mountains, stars, and among them, figures. Small figures, hairless figures, standing beside enormous reptilian hunters. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. Long limbs, rounded heads, forward-facing eyes, five-fingered hands. Commander Elias felt a chill run through him. The silhouettes looked unmistakably human. The chamber erupted into overlapping voices. It resembles them. That's coincidence. It could depict dozens of species. No. The proportions, they're identical. The Coalition historian stepped closer, until he stood inside the hologram itself. His scanner hovered across the ancient images. He frowned. Incredible craftsmanship, but still only artwork. Kareth remained silent. The historian activated a deeper scan. Age analysis, mineral dating, pigment decay. The machine processed for several seconds. Then it emitted a sharp confirmation tone. The floating display turned crimson. The historian's face drained of color. His hands began to shake. Another delegate leaned forward. What is it? The historian swallowed. His voice barely emerged. These carvings. He looked from the results to the human standing quietly beside the towering predator, then back again, are millions of years old. No one spoke. The historian's scanner still hovered over the ancient cave images, its crimson warning light pulsing rhythmically through the Hall of Concord. Age verified estimated origin, 7 million standard years. The numbers refused to change. Again and again, the historian recalibrated the instrument, muttering calculations beneath his breath. No, he shook his head. This has to be contamination. He initiated a second scan, then a third. Each one returned the same impossible result. The pigments embedded within the stone predated every known spacefaring civilization, older than the Galactic Coalition, older than the first recorded empires, older than any living species' written history. A ripple of uneasy whispers swept through the immense chamber. Impossible. Our oldest ruins are barely 200,000 years old. How could anyone have painted humans millions of years ago? Commander Elias Carter stared at the holographic wall in silence. The painted figures were crude, almost childlike, yet unmistakable. Broad shoulders, 2 arms, 2 legs, rounded skulls, 5 fingers. One figure even carried what looked remarkably similar to a backpack. His rational mind rejected everything he was seeing. Humans had only begun exploring space a few centuries earlier. Everything taught in Earth's academies insisted their civilization was young. So why did those figures look as though someone had watched humans with their own eyes? Before Elias could form another question, every light inside the hall dimmed. The Coalition emblem suspended above the chamber flickered, then disappeared. A warning tone echoed through the building. Not loud, not panicked, cold, deliberate. A metallic voice spoke throughout the station. Unauthorized fleet entering restricted diplomatic space. Every delegate looked upward. Another announcement followed. Fleet strength exceeds Coalition defensive projections. The mood changed instantly. Diplomats became soldiers. Security officers moved toward defensive positions. Floating tactical displays unfolded above the central floor, one after another. Crimson symbols appeared around the station. Then dozens, then hundreds. The atmosphere inside the hall tightened like a drawn bowstring. A Vorthak commander frowned. Who would violate summit neutrality? An Illa strategist studied the tactical display. There was no hyperspace signature. They simply, she hesitated, appeared. That answer unsettled even Kareth. No fleet simply appeared, not without technology unknown to the Coalition. The chamber doors burst open. A Coalition officer rushed inside, breathing heavily. "Emergency report!" He barely slowed before the Grand Council. An unidentified armada has surrounded the station. Communications? Open. Intentions? The officer swallowed. They demanded immediate audience. The council speaker's expression hardened. Grant visual. The center of the chamber transformed into a massive holographic display. Stars shimmered into existence, then ships, rows upon rows of them, perfectly aligned, silent. Each vessel possessed an unsettling design unlike anything in Coalition records. Their hulls were smooth and bone-white, interrupted only by black geometric seams that seemed to absorb surrounding light. No visible weapons, no visible engines, yet every tactical computer classified them as an existential threat. The hall grew quieter. Someone whispered, "I've never seen ships like those." Neither had Elias. The largest vessel slowly advanced toward the station. Then a transmission connected. The hologram shifted. A tall figure appeared. Its features were almost humanoid. Pale gray skin, dark, expressionless eyes, no visible hair. Its uniform carried no decorations, no rank, no symbols of pride. Only one insignia rested over its chest, a black circle divided by 3 claw-like lines. The stranger spoke with calm precision. "We acknowledge the governing authority of this assembly." Its voice carried neither anger nor respect, only certainty. "We have not come for war." Several delegates visibly relaxed. Then the stranger continued, "We have come to reclaim our property." Confused murmurs spread through the audience. The council speaker frowned. The Coalition recognizes no ownership of sovereign citizens. The stranger's expression never changed. The biological specimen identified as human. Every eye turned toward Elias. The alien continued, "He belongs to us." Silence. Then laughter erupted, not nervous laughter. Open ridicule. A merchant nearly doubled over. "You crossed half the galaxy for one tiny diplomat?" Another ambassador shook his head. "Is this some elaborate performance?" Even several military officers smiled. "The human?" One Vorthak laughed loudly. "If you wish to conquer something, you chose poorly." The stranger waited patiently for the laughter to fade, then spoke again. "The specimen carries archived genetic inheritance. It must be returned." The laughter became louder. "Returned? To whom? What nonsense!" Elias himself couldn't suppress a confused smile. "I assure you," he said, "I'm not anyone's property." The stranger ignored him completely. Its attention remained fixed upon the council. "Our claim predates your government's. Compliance is advised." The council speaker folded 4 arms across his ceremonial robes. "Your claim is rejected. You have presented no evidence." The stranger nodded once. As expected, its transmission remained perfectly calm. "No further discussion is necessary." Then the screen went dark. The tactical display immediately exploded with warning signals. Fleet formations shifted. Weapons, previously hidden within the smooth white hulls, unfolded in terrifying synchronization. Hundreds, thousands. The station's defense computers began calculating casualty projections. None were favorable. Across the chamber, military commanders barked rapid orders. Yet Kareth heard none of them. His eyes remained locked on the final frozen image of the vanished transmission. Specifically, the insignia, that black circle. 3 claw-like fractures. The color drained from the ancient predator's face. His breathing slowed. A memory stirred, not his own. The first memory. Images buried beneath countless generations. Stone, fire, fear, warning. His massive hand instinctively gripped one of the ceremonial scars carved across his chest. A young Karzul officer noticed immediately. Supreme Warlord? No answer. Kareth stepped toward the fading hologram. His enormous claws hovered inches from the black symbol. His voice emerged as little more than a whisper. "No, Another elder recognized the look in his commander's eyes. "You know that mark." Kareth closed his eyes. "I have seen it before." The chamber fell silent once more. The historian looked up. "Where?" Kareth opened his eyes slowly. "In the warning tablets." Every Karzul warrior stiffened. Several lowered their heads instinctively. One whispered an ancient prayer. The coalition delegates exchanged confused looks. "What warning tablets?" Kareth did not answer immediately. His gaze shifted toward Commander Elias Carter. For the first time since they had met, the great predator's expression wasn't filled with reverence. It was filled with fear. Not fear for himself, for the human. He took one slow step closer until only Elias could hear him. His deep voice was barely audible. "If they found you..." His eyes drifted toward the stars beyond the great windows. "Then they found Earth." The words refused to leave Elias Carter's mind. "If they found you, then they found Earth." Around him, the Hall of Concord had dissolved into controlled chaos. Coalition officers hurried between tactical stations. Emergency shields sealed the towering entrances. Military commanders argued over fleet formations while diplomats who had arrived expecting speeches now watched star maps filled with hostile vessels. But to Elias, the noise felt strangely distant. He looked at Kareth. The ancient predator had not exaggerated once since they met. Every revelation that had sounded impossible had been proven, piece by piece. First the ancient greeting, then the legend, then the cave paintings. Now fear, not of battle, of history. Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You know something." Kareth's eyes remained fixed on the tactical display. "I know fragments." "Then tell me." The predator hesitated. "It is forbidden." "By whom?" "Our ancestors." The answer only deepened the mystery. Before Elias could ask another question, the Coalition Council speaker struck the ceremonial staff against the crystal floor. The sharp crack echoed through the chamber. "Enough." Every conversation ceased. "If the enemy claims humanity possesses genetic property," the speaker declared, "we require evidence before making strategic decisions." He turned toward Kareth. "You spoke of ancient warnings." The predator inclined his head. "I did. Can they be verified?" Kareth slowly nodded. "They were never meant to be opened." A murmur rippled through the chamber. The historian who had dated the cave paintings adjusted his scanner nervously. "What exactly are these warning tablets?" Kareth answered with visible reluctance. "Our oldest archive. They were sealed before our first cities. They may only be opened if the Sky Hunters return." The title drew immediate attention. The Sky Hunters? Kareth looked toward the darkened holographic display where the enemy insignia had disappeared moments earlier. "That is what our ancestors called them. The beings who hunted worlds." Silence settled over the assembly once again. The council speaker made his decision. "Retrieve the archive." Several Karzul officers exchanged uneasy glances. One elder stepped forward. "Supreme Warlord, if we break the first seal, there can be no return." Kareth closed his eyes briefly. There was never going to be. Hours later, deep beneath the Hall of Concord, hidden behind layers of vaults older than the station itself, a chamber opened for the first time in centuries. Unlike the grand architecture above, this place was simple. Bare stone, ancient metal, no decoration. At its center rested a massive black monolith, covered in symbols no coalition translator recognized. The air itself felt heavier, almost reverent. Only a handful of individuals were permitted inside. Kareth, Commander Elias Carter, the coalition speaker, the chief historian, 2 military observers, nothing more. The elderly Karzul placed one scarred hand against the stone. His voice became quiet. "My father opened this chamber once." The historian looked surprised. "I thought you said no one had." Kareth nodded. "He entered. He never broke the seal. Afterward, he refused to speak of what he saw." A long silence followed. Then Kareth pressed both hands against the ancient markings. The symbols awakened. Golden light flowed beneath the stone like liquid fire. Deep mechanisms, untouched for ages beyond imagination, groaned to life. The monolith slowly separated. Dust poured into the air. Inside rested dozens of crystal memory prisms, perfectly preserved. The historian's breathing quickened. "Incredible." Kareth carefully lifted one. "It remembers." The prism projected itself automatically. Light filled the chamber. Stars emerged. Not a map, a recording. Everyone instinctively stepped backward. The image sharpened. An enormous spiral of explored space stretched before them. Thousands, no, millions of marked systems, trade routes, scientific stations, colonies, exploration fleets. The historian stared in disbelief. "This is impossible." The map covered regions of the galaxy no coalition vessel had ever reached. Elias narrowed his eyes. One symbol flashed repeatedly. A blue sphere. Earth. His heartbeat quickened. "Why is Earth on this map?" No one answered. The recording continued. Ships crossed impossible distances. Stations orbited unfamiliar suns. Human voices echoed faintly beneath layers of static. "Expedition Fleet 7. Outer Perseus Corridor secured. Terraforming complete." The chamber froze. Human. English, modern enough to understand, old enough to be impossible, the historian whispered. These are human transmissions. Another recording activated. A woman appeared wearing a uniform unlike anything in Earth's current military. Behind her stretched a starship bridge. She spoke directly into the recording. To whoever inherits Earth. Everyone watched in stunned silence. Her face carried exhaustion. Not fear, resolve. If you're seeing this, our final decision has already been made. The image briefly distorted before stabilizing again. We were not defeated. Another pause. We chose to disappear. Elias felt every hair on his arm stand up. The woman continued. The enemy cannot conquer what it cannot find. The Coalition speaker stared at the recording. You abandoned an interstellar civilization? The recording answered before anyone else could. Every colony will be erased. Every archive destroyed. Every navigation record burned. The historian looked horrified. They erased themselves. Kareth slowly nodded. The recording continued. Humanity will begin again. Primitive, small, forgotten. One day, our descendants may ask why they were left behind. The woman smiled sadly. Tell them. Her voice softened. We were protecting them. The projection ended. Silence consumed the chamber. Commander Elias stood motionless. Everything he had believed about humanity's history fractured in an instant. Earth hadn't been isolated because it was insignificant. It had been hidden, deliberately. Its greatest achievement wasn't forgotten by accident. It had been sacrificed. Entire generations had surrendered the stars so their descendants might survive. Kareth looked at Elias with quiet sympathy. This is why our people waited. Elias could barely speak. He swallowed. We had an empire? Kareth shook his head. No, his amber eyes reflected something close to admiration. You had something greater. You had the wisdom to let it go. No one argued. No one could. The room remained silent until alarms suddenly erupted throughout the chamber. A tactical officer's voice echoed from the communication network. Emergency transmission from hostile fleet. The projection above the monolith dissolved. The pale commander from the mysterious empire appeared once again. This time, it was smiling. Our search is complete. Its dark eyes seemed almost amused. We commend your ancestors. They hid your world well. A dreadful pause followed. Then came the words that drained every trace of hope from the room. We have already located Earth. The transmission ended. No farewell, no threat, no dramatic declaration of conquest, only silence. It was somehow more terrifying. For several long seconds, no one inside the archive chamber moved. The pale commander's final words echoed in every mind. We have already located Earth. Commander Elias Carter slowly lowered his head. Earth, his home, a blue world where children still argued over homework, where families gathered around dinner tables, where millions looked toward the stars with curiosity instead of fear. Most of them had no idea that an ancient enemy had just rediscovered them. The thought settled like a stone in his chest. The Coalition speaker was the first to regain composure. We must evacuate Earth immediately. A Vorthak general shook his massive head. It is too late. He enlarged the tactical projection. The hostile fleet had already divided into multiple formations. Several squadrons were accelerating toward the Orion frontier, toward Sol. Our fastest fleets cannot intercept them. The A-list strategist studied the calculations. If we pursue directly, she paused, we lose. No one challenged the conclusion. The enemy possessed superior numbers, superior technology, and apparently knowledge that had survived millions of years. For the first time in Coalition history, defeat seemed mathematically certain. Around the chamber, old rivalries resurfaced almost instantly. We should defend our own borders. The Karzul should lead the assault. The Vorthak have the strongest fleet. The Elis navigation arrays are responsible. No, this began with humanity. Voices rose. Accusations spread. Centuries of political distrust reappeared within moments. Elias watched the argument spiral. He had seen this before. Not in interstellar diplomacy, on Earth. Emergency response exercises, natural disasters, military coalitions. When fear took control, everyone protected their own interests. No one coordinated, and divided forces always lost. He took a slow breath, then climbed onto the central tactical platform. I need everyone's attention. Almost no one looked at him. The arguments continued. A Vorthak commander slammed his fist onto the strategy table. We do not take orders from newcomers. Another ambassador pointed toward Elias. This concerns your species. Then save yourselves. The chamber erupted again. Elias didn't shout. Instead, he reached over and deactivated the tactical display. The hologram vanished. Instantly, every delegate stopped speaking. Hundreds of irritated eyes turned toward the small human. For several uncomfortable seconds, Elias simply looked around the room. No anger, no fear, just calm. When I was 12 years old, he began quietly. My hometown flooded. The delegates exchanged puzzled glances. A flood? What did that have to do with an ancient enemy? Elias continued. The firefighters couldn't reach everyone. The police were overwhelmed. The military hadn't arrived. He looked around the room. Do you know who saved most of the people? Silence. My neighbors. He smiled faintly. A baker, a mechanic, a schoolteacher. People who argued every week about completely meaningless things. Several delegates frowned, trying to understand. But when the water came, nobody asked who owned which house. They asked one question: who needs help next? The hall became quieter. Elias slowly walked around the strategy platform. Right now, every one of you is still protecting your own neighborhood. He pointed toward the frozen star map. The enemy isn't. Those words landed. The Vorthak general folded his arms. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we stop acting like separate civilizations. One of the Hrax representatives clicked thoughtfully. Impossible. Elias smiled. On Earth, we call that Tuesday. A few confused expressions appeared. The translator hesitated, then rendered the intended meaning. Human idiom, cooperation under constant disagreement. Several delegates actually chuckled. The tension eased. Only slightly. It was enough. Elias stepped toward the tactical display and reactivated it. Instead of organizing fleets by species, he organized them by capability. Vorthak. He looked at the towering warriors. You're the strongest defensive line in known space. The general nodded cautiously. Elis, you navigate gravitational anomalies better than anyone. The crystalline delegates inclined their heads. Hrax. No species processes battlefield information faster. The insectoids clicked proudly. Karzul. He turned toward Kareth. No one understands hunting. The ancient predator's eyes narrowed with interest. Elias smiled. So stop fighting like armies. He rearranged the fleet formations. Fight like one organism. Colored formations shifted across the display. Vorthak ships became shields. Elis vessels created impossible navigation corridors. Hrax coordinated fleet communication. Karzul strike groups disappeared into predicted blind spots. Individually, none could stop the enemy. Together, an entirely different strategy emerged. The military observers began whispering. He isn't increasing firepower, he's increasing efficiency. The Hrax analyst suddenly froze. Our response time. His compound eyes widened. It improves by 37%. An Elis navigator recalculated. Our travel routes become unpredictable. The Vorthak commander looked genuinely surprised. Our fleet losses decrease by half. The room slowly fell silent again. Not from fear, from realization. Elias wasn't stronger than them. He simply looked at the problem differently. Kareth watched without interrupting. His expression slowly softened into something resembling pride. He remembered the first memory. The tiny strangers who survived impossible worlds. Not because they possessed the sharpest claws, because they adapted faster than the dangers around them. One of the young Karzul officers whispered, "They think sideways." The elder beside him nodded. As the story said, Kareth stepped toward Elias. For the first time since the summit began, the ancient predator placed one enormous claw over his own heart, not as a salute, as family. His deep voice carried across the command chamber. No longer allies. Every Karzul warrior immediately mirrored the gesture. The movement echoed like synchronized thunder. Kareth looked directly at the human. "You are kin." The words spread through the chamber. Not diplomat, not representative, not human. Kin. Then, with unmistakable warmth in his voice, Kareth spoke the title once more. "Little brother." No one laughed this time. The Vorthak bowed their heads. The Elis dimmed respectfully. Even species that had mocked humanity only hours earlier now watched the small ambassador with new eyes. Not because he had won a battle, because he had united those who never could. Hope, fragile but undeniable, began to replace despair. Then every light in the chamber turned blood red. A deafening alarm echoed through the station. One tactical officer shouted, "Massive energy surge detected!" Another stared at the sensor data in disbelief. "It isn't coming from the enemy fleet!" The projection zoomed toward the Sol system, toward Earth. Deep beneath the planet's surface, something enormous awakened. Ancient power signatures erupted across every continent simultaneously. The readings climbed higher and higher, until Coalition sensors could no longer calculate them. The tactical officer looked up, his face pale. His voice shook. "They've activated something." He swallowed hard. An ancient superweapon hidden beneath Earth's surface. Red warning lights washed over the Coalition command chamber. Every tactical display focused on a single point in the galaxy. Sol, Earth. Sensor reports flooded across the command table faster than translators could process them. Unknown energy source confirmed. Planetary seismic activity increasing. Artificial structures detected beneath every continental plate. Power output exceeds Coalition classification limits. The officers exchanged stunned looks. The impossible was happening. Earth, an ordinary, young world by every official record, was awakening. Commander Elias Carter stared at the projection in disbelief. He whispered to himself, "What did our ancestors leave behind?" No one answered, because no one knew. The strategic calculations were merciless. The Coalition's combined fleets launched within minutes. Thousands of warships entered faster than light corridors simultaneously. But the numbers refused to change. The enemy had arrived first. By hours, perhaps days, the difference was enough. An Alice navigator lowered her crystalline head. "We cannot reach Earth before contact." Silence. A Vorthak admiral slammed his fist against the command console. "There has to be another route." There isn't. The Frax Tactical Collective ran millions of simulations. Every result ended the same way. Failure. Commander Elias looked around the room. Faces that had represented the greatest civilizations in the galaxy only hours before now carried the same helpless expression. He recognized it. The look people wore when time itself became the enemy. He made his decision. "I'll go alone." The chamber turned toward him. The Coalition speaker blinked. "What?" Elias remained calm. "There are diplomatic courier vessels docked beneath the station. They're faster than warships. They won't survive combat. I don't need them to." Kareth took one heavy step forward. "No." The single word echoed through the chamber. Elias met the Predator's eyes. "If I'm right." He gestured toward Earth's growing energy readings. "Whatever our ancestors built won't recognize any of you." Kareth's silence confirmed he understood. "It may recognize me." The Vorthak commander objected immediately. "You'll die." Elias smiled faintly. "Probably." The room grew still. But if humanity really erased its own history, someone has to remember why. He looked toward the stars displayed above the command table. "My people don't even know they're in danger. I do." That's enough. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Kareth slowly removed the ceremonial pendant hanging around his neck. It was ancient, worn smooth by countless generations. He placed it into Elias's hand. "Our first memory." Elias looked down. "I can't take this." "You must." Kareth closed the human's fingers around the pendant. "If the stories survive, our people survive." For the first time, Elias saw moisture gathering in the old Predator's eyes. It wasn't fear. It was the pain of sending family into impossible danger. Kareth lowered his head. "Return home, little brother." Hours later, Earth. Blue oceans shimmered beneath scattered clouds. Children laughed in city parks. Farmers worked distant fields. Passengers hurried through crowded train stations. No one looked toward the stars. No one knew that hundreds of hostile warships had already entered the outer solar system. The first alarms came from orbital defense satellites. Then, military observatories. Then, every government on Earth. Unknown fleet detected. Global emergency declared. Confusion spread faster than panic. No nation understood what they were seeing. Before world leaders could even organize a response, a single diplomatic shuttle pierced Earth's atmosphere. Its engines screamed from the strain. Commander Elias Carter barely waited for landing clearance. The hatch opened before the vessel had completely settled. He ran. Military vehicles surrounded the landing platform. Security personnel shouted questions. "Elias, what happened? Who are they?" He ignored them all. "Where is the deepest geological survey station?" The officers looked confused. "What?" "The deepest underground facility. Now." Something in his voice erased every hesitation. Minutes later, helicopters raced toward an isolated mountain complex, built decades earlier to study Earth's mantle. Scientists met him underground. None understood why the ambassador had arrived breathless from deep space. He barely slowed. "Show me your deepest chamber." One elderly geologist frowned. "There's nothing down there except bedrock." "I hope you're wrong." Nearly 5 kilometers beneath Earth's surface. The elevator doors opened. Solid stone surrounded them. Ancient rock. Untouched by civilization. Elias stepped forward. The pendant Kareth had given him suddenly grew warm. He froze. The scientists exchanged uncertain glances. "Commander?" The warmth became heat, then light. The pendant projected a beam toward the cavern wall. The mountain trembled. Stone shifted. Dust rained from the ceiling. Before everyone's eyes, what had appeared to be natural rock began unfolding with impossible precision. Hidden doors emerged. Metal, untouched by time, reflected soft golden light. One scientist stumbled backward. "My God! It was here all along." The corridor beyond awakened as Elias entered. Lights ignited one after another. Machines dormant for millions of years quietly came alive. A calm voice echoed through the passage. "Genetic confirmation requested." Elias stopped. A thin beam swept across his body. His heartbeat echoed loudly in the silence. The machine processed. 1 second, 2, 3, then. Human genome verified. Every light inside the immense facility awakened simultaneously. The mountain shook violently. Across Earth, ancient structures buried beneath oceans, deserts, ice sheets, mountain ranges, all activated together. Orbital satellites detected enormous energy shields rising around the planet. Defense platforms emerged from beneath the moon's surface. Countless hidden stations unfolded from asteroids throughout the solar system. The forgotten civilization had not abandoned humanity. It had waited, only for humans. Coalition sensors confirmed the impossible. The ancient defense network ignored every alien lifeform, ignored every coalition fleet, ignored every hostile signal. It had recognized only one thing: human DNA. The enemy armada arrived above Earth moments later. Thousands of white warships emerged from hyperspace. They immediately opened fire. Brilliant lances of energy crashed toward the planet. None reached it. Golden shields blossomed across Earth's atmosphere like living sunlight. Every attack dissolved harmlessly against them. The enemy fleet hesitated. For the first time, then Earth's ancient defenses answered. Silent orbital platforms rotated into firing position. Beams of concentrated light crossed millions of kilometers in an instant. Enemy vessels vanished, not exploded, vanished. Entire formations disappeared before they understood they had been targeted. Panic spread through the invading fleet. Then hyperspace fractured once again. The Coalition had arrived, not in time to save Earth, but in time to stand beside it. The first ships through the rupture belonged to the Karzul. Kareth's flagship emerged at full combat speed. Behind him came the Vorthak, the Elis, the Hrax, dozens of civilizations, not as rivals, as one fleet. Kareth's voice thundered across every communication channel. "Protect our little brother." The Predators charged without hesitation, not to conquer humanity, to shield it. Vorthak battleships formed living walls before Earth's orbital defenses. Elis navigators bent gravity itself, scattering enemy formations. The Hrax coordinated every movement with flawless precision. Meanwhile, Earth's forgotten machines struck relentlessly from beneath the stars. Humanity and the Coalition fought as one. The battle that should have ended civilization instead became the first victory shared by an entire galaxy. Hours later, the white enemy fleet was in retreat. Burning wreckage drifted silently between the planets. The pale commander appeared once more upon every screen. For the first time, its perfect composure was gone. Its dark eyes studied Elias Carter with genuine disbelief. Then it asked the one question no conqueror had ever expected to ask. "Who taught your species to survive like this?" The battlefield had fallen silent. Where thousands of hostile ships had once darkened the skies above Earth, only drifting wreckage remained. Fragments of shattered hulls reflected the light of the sun like scattered ice, slowly tumbling through the emptiness between worlds. Coalition rescue vessels moved carefully among them. Medical ships answered distress beacons. Salvage drones searched for survivors. For the first time since the mysterious empire had appeared, the galaxy was not watching a war. It was watching what happened after one. Commander Elias Carter stood inside Earth's newly awakened command complex, staring through a transparent observation wall at the blue planet below. Home, the ancient defense network, had already begun shutting itself down. Massive orbital platforms folded back into hidden chambers. Shield generators dimmed. Buried gateways sealed themselves beneath mountains and oceans once more. It was as though Earth's forgotten guardians had completed the task they had waited millions of years to perform. A quiet voice spoke behind him. "You chose mercy." Elias turned. Kareth entered alone, without armor, without weapons. The ancient predator looked older than ever before, not weaker, simply relieved. Elias slowly shook his massive head. The greatest victories are rarely loud. For a moment, neither spoke. Both simply watched Earth turning peacefully beneath them. Then Elias asked the question that had lingered since the summit. "Why?" Kareth looked at him. "Why, little brother?" The old predator closed his eyes. "I have delayed that answer for too long." He walked toward the center of the chamber where one of the ancient memory prisms still rested upon its pedestal. The crystal pulsed softly as though recognizing him. "It remembers more than war." His claw touched the prism. Golden light surrounded them. The room disappeared. They stood inside another memory, not as participants, as witnesses. An unfamiliar world stretched before them. Towering forests covered enormous mountains. Primitive Karzul gathered inside crude stone shelters, their scales scarred by countless hunts. Many were injured, many were starving. Young hatchlings huddled close to exhausted mothers. Fear filled every face. Then the sky opened. A sleek silver vessel descended through the clouds. Its landing thrusters scattered leaves across the valley. The hatch lowered. Humans stepped out. They wore simple exploration suits. No heavy weapons, no conquering banners, no symbols of empire. Only curiosity. One young Karzul warrior raised a sharpened stone spear. An elder stopped him. The strangers didn't attack. Instead, one human slowly removed his helmet. He smiled. Then he placed his own supplies on the ground and stepped backward. An invitation, not a demand. Elias watched in silence. They came to help. Kareth nodded. They found a dying species. The memory continued. Human doctors treated infected wounds. Engineers redirected rivers toward dry farmland. Scientists taught simple agriculture instead of dependence. They repaired shelters, purified water, shared knowledge, never asking for land, never demanding tribute. Months passed in moments. The starving valley slowly became a thriving settlement. One scene replaced another. A young human woman laughed as frightened Karzul hatchlings learned to read symbols scratched into smooth stone. An elderly engineer patiently showed hunters how to reinforce bridges against floods. Human children played beside predator children. Neither feared the other. Elias felt an unexpected warmth in his chest. It wasn't military strength that had changed history. It was compassion. The memory darkened. A new scene appeared. A council gathered beneath unfamiliar stars. The human expedition prepared to leave. The Karzul elders surrounded them. Many bowed. Some openly wept. One elder offered treasures, weapons, rare crystals, precious metals. The human captain gently declined them all. Instead, she knelt so she could look directly into the frightened eyes of the youngest hatchlings. Then she spoke words that echoed through millions of years. "One day, you will become stronger than we are." The children listened without moving. "When that day comes," she smiled, "remember what strength is for." She stood, looking across the entire gathering. She gave them one final promise. "Grow strong." A pause, "but never forget kindness." The words settled over the valley. Simple, quiet, yet somehow greater than any monument. The humans boarded their ship. As it disappeared into the stars, every Karzul bowed together. Not because they had been conquered, because they had been loved. The memory faded. The command chamber slowly returned. Neither Elias nor Kareth spoke immediately. Finally, Elias whispered, "They changed your civilization." Kareth slowly nodded. "No." His amber eyes glistened. "They gave us one." He looked toward the stars where the ancient enemy had fled. "Our ancestors became powerful. We learned to hunt. We conquered impossible worlds. We became feared." His voice softened. "But every child, from the first hatchling to the newest born, learns the first promise before learning to fight." Elias stared. "The first promise," Kareth smiled. "It is our oldest law." He lowered his head respectfully. "Not written by Karzul, given to us by humans." Suddenly, countless communication requests flooded the command center. Coalition channels, civilian broadcasts, government networks, news relays. Every civilization in the galaxy was asking the same question. What had truly happened? The Coalition speaker's voice came through the communications console. "High Warlord, the galaxy is waiting." Kareth looked at Elias, then toward Earth, then toward the stars where humanity's forgotten ancestors had vanished so long ago. Slowly, the ancient predator straightened to his full height. He drew one deep breath and accepted a live transmission that would carry his words to every inhabited world in the galaxy. The transmission reached every known world, every military flagship, every orbital station, every colony, every city connected to the Galactic Coalition. From bustling trade ports beneath twin suns to isolated research outposts drifting alone between the stars, billions paused to watch. The image that appeared on their screens was not of a victorious emperor, nor a conquering fleet. It was of High Warlord Kareth, standing beside the smallest ambassador in the history of the Coalition. The contrast between them was striking. One was a towering predator whose name had inspired fear for centuries. The other was a human who barely reached the warlord's chest. Yet no one laughed anymore. Kareth stood in silence for several moments, allowing every world to witness what came next. Then, in full view of the galaxy, he lowered his head toward Commander Elias Carter. It was not the hurried kneel of surprise from the Hall of Concord. It was deliberate. A choice, a declaration. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of millions of years. "People of the Coalition, you have long known the Karzul as hunters, as warriors, as conquerors." He paused, his amber eyes sweeping across the countless cameras. "You believed strength created our civilization. It did not." He turned toward Elias. "Kindness did." The galaxy fell silent. Kareth continued. "Our oldest law, our first lesson, our greatest honor." He placed one claw over his heart, "was given to us by those you mocked." A holographic image appeared beside him. It showed the ancient memory of humans sharing food with frightened Karzul children. Not soldiers, not kings, ordinary explorers. Another image followed. Human engineers rebuilding homes after floods, doctors treating the wounded, teachers surrounded by curious hatchlings, no weapons, only helping hands. Kareth's voice softened. "They could have ruled us. They chose to raise us. They could have demanded obedience. They taught responsibility. They could have left us to die. They stayed. Across the galaxy, entire cities watched without speaking. The Vorthak homeworld fell silent. The Elis crystal cities dimmed in mourning and respect. Even the Hrax collective, a civilization that valued logic above emotion, suspended all non-essential communication to listen. Kareth raised his head proudly. Today, before every living civilization, I correct the greatest mistake in our history. He turned fully toward Elias Carter, then spoke the words that would enter the history of every world forever. Humanity is not a young species. They are not a lesser species. They are not newcomers. His voice thundered across the stars. They are our founding kin. A wave of emotion swept through the chamber. The same ambassadors who had laughed when Elias first entered the Hall of Concord slowly rose from their seats. The Vorthak ambassador was first. The enormous warrior struck his fist against his chest, then bowed. The Elis followed, lowering their radiant crystalline forms until their light reflected across the polished floor. The Hrax collective synchronized into a gesture of complete respect, something they had performed only for the oldest civilizations. One by one, every delegate stood, every head bowed. No order had been given, none was needed. Commander Elias Carter looked around the chamber where he had first been mocked. The laughter was gone, replaced by something infinitely more powerful. Understanding. The coalition speaker stepped forward. Commander Carter. The elder statesman smiled warmly. The galaxy would hear humanity's answer. Every camera turned toward Elias. For a brief moment, he considered speaking about Earth's forgotten empire, its hidden defenses, its ancient technology. He could have spoken of impossible weapons capable of defeating civilizations. Instead, he looked at Kareth, then at the ancient memory still glowing beside them. Finally, he addressed the stars. My people spent today discovering that our ancestors once reached farther than we ever imagined. He smiled gently. But I don't think that's what mattered most. The chamber listened. Our greatest achievement wasn't building powerful machines. It wasn't exploring distant galaxies. It wasn't even surviving. He glanced toward the image of human explorers helping frightened children. Our greatest achievement was leaving behind friends instead of subjects. Several delegates lowered their eyes. Elias continued. If you're remembered only because people feared you, your strength dies with you. But if you're remembered because you showed kindness when you didn't have to, he smiled, then a part of you never disappears. Silence. Warm, peaceful, hopeful. The human ambassador spread his hands slightly. Real strength isn't measured by how many enemies you can defeat. It's measured by how many people stand beside you when the battle is over. No one applauded. Some moments were too meaningful for noise. Kareth stepped beside Elias. For a long time, the ancient predator simply looked at the human. Then, quietly enough that it sounded almost like a father speaking to family, he repeated the words that had begun everything. Little brother. This time, every species understood. It had never meant that humans were weaker. It had never referred to size. It was a title of love, of gratitude, of family. The smallest species in the room had never been small at all. Epilogue months passed. Earth joined the Galactic Coalition not as a curiosity, but as an honored civilization. The story of the first promise became required study in academies across known space. Children who had once feared the Karzul now watched them arrive carrying relief supplies instead of weapons. Old enemies began speaking before they started fighting, not because war had vanished, but because someone had proven another path was possible. Far beyond the borders of Coalition space, beyond mapped stars, beyond every ancient chart recovered from humanity's forgotten archives, a lonely probe drifted through the darkness. Its systems had slept for millions of years, until now. A single signal from Earth's reawakened defenses reached it. Dust fell from its weathered hull. Ancient lights flickered to life. One forgotten message transmitted into the void. Promise keepers located. A pause. Then another signal answered from somewhere unimaginably distant. Not one, dozens, perhaps hundreds, ancient civilizations, waiting, remembering, keeping promises of their own. And somewhere in the darkness, another voice whispered the same title that had echoed across history. Little brother.